original option 3, that all those hectares were set aside for employment lands. Like, what was the thinking behind that, in the current option 3 as it exists?
Okay, and Louise, that's probably a real big deep dive question. I think I asked Jane to kind of start at the beginning.
Okay.
And then let's make sure that that gets answered. And I can put up on the screen the 4 options as they exist, but I don't know if I want to throw it up just yet. So Jane, do you want to back it right up before the delay motion even in February?
Yeah, I want to go back a little bit to the beginning because there's a whole series of things that get us to where we are today, and primarily through regulation from the province through the Planning Act. So municipalities are required by the province to plan for growth and to have a 15-year supply of land to accommodate the assigned population. And so that means housing. How are we going to house people? And we've got to approve these lands while being consistent with the requirements of the provincial policy statement and the provincial growth plan, which we'll call the Places to Grow Act. So back in 2005, it became obvious to everybody, including the provincial government, that we needed to get a grip on sprawl. Okay, so we needed to get a grip on sprawl. And so the provincial policy statement was updated and just a minute. Okay, we got the provincial policy statement updated, and they created the Greenbelt as part of limiting the sprawl thing. That's where that came from. But also, there was a new planning act, which we will call Places to Grow. It has a longer title, but anyway, Places to Grow. So we're going back approximately 15 years. Everything geared to reduce sprawl by increasing intensification over time. So it included a provision that municipalities could only contemplate opening up their urban boundaries after a comprehensive municipal review, or municipal comprehensive review, however you want to put it. So that happens every 10 years. So you should know there is a line in the sand but it's on a map that tells you what urban area is and what it isn't. And you can't actually see that line when you're driving around. You have to see it on a map. Of doing this 10-year comprehensive review, which takes us several years to do, but we're in the middle of it when the Ford government was elected. And the Ford government quickly rewrote the rules on how municipalities plan for growth. So the new rules included, we needed to put in the entire lump sum of land needed for the next 30 years into the future, and plan also for the market for single family dwellings. We'd never had that before. That's not how we figured out growth for this thing called the market for single family dwellings. The urban area you could think of as anything that's not rural. So we'll sort of look at it in those. Because there are 2 types of urban areas that have this boundary around them. One is where the population lives, but it's filled with commercial areas and institutional uses, schools and and malls and things. So that's the urban area that's population based. You could call it community if you like. Then there is another urban area called employment. And that's, in our case, in it's not attached to Georgetown. There's some within Georgetown that's old employment from the old days, but there's new employment lands that are just sort of set aside. They're not connected necessarily to the population. And it's entirely for employment uses. It gets a little bit of mixed use if they might put in a hotel at say at the 401 in Trafalgar Road. That's an employment area that's not attached to where people live. So you should also know that we have areas set aside for both population and employment land uses that could only start to be built on this year, 2021, and was to accommodate the growth to go to 2031. So once again, in the case of Georgetown, we have 1,000 acres that are set aside for growth from 21 to 31, and we are nowhere near starting to build on that. So it's just sitting there. And the only reason you know it's been taken into the urban area is that farmhouses have been knocked down, barns have been taken away. But other than that, it's still being farmed by not absentee farmers, but farmers who will come in and farm it. It's all divided up and owned by various developers. And we've been spending the last 10 years trying to agree on the plan of what growth will look like on that 1,000 acres. But it's not up for discussion right now. But it's available for community use. Likewise, there are large stretches of land that are vacant right now that are taken into that 2031 timeframe for employment uses. So we have a ton of land for employment uses already designated, and it's designated in that 2021 to 2031. Anyway, as I said, we were in the middle of doing the comprehensive review of what would have been 2031 to 2041. So the next 10-year time frame. We were well underway when Doug Ford dropped in that we had to actually plan to 2051. So now we've got like a 20-year time frame of saying, well, this is how we think it'll go. This is how much land we think we need. And so we've got to change stuff in the middle of what we were already doing. So, okay, let's talk a little bit about the process of what is involved in this review and how is it being conducted. So, it's a very complicated thing. How do you plan for where the land will be? Because we're doing all of Halton at one time, but the population figure is just one big number. It's not assigned to Milton. It's not assigned to Oakville, Burlington, or Halton Hills at this stage. So to get our minds around what this is for both counselors and for staff, but also for the public, the staff came up with 4 different scenarios of how we might accommodate the population we've been assigned and the jobs that need to go with that. And roughly, we'll say we need to grow to 1 million people, and we need 500,000 jobs, or it's 1 job for every 2 people in the population. So throughout Halton, where the land might be that we bring into the urban area. And when we say that, we take that line, that's the urban boundary, and move it out somewhere, just create new town someplace. So the urban area you've got now will shift if possible. But over the last few years, we've had some communities growing right up to the edge of other communities. So Oakville has gotten to the edge of where their municipal boundary is. So the urban boundary lines up exactly with their municipal boundary, and they can't go any further. But in the case of Milton and Halton Hills, our urban boundaries do not use up all the land that's in the municipal boundary. So there is space out there that's farmland or rural, that's not in the green belt either. It doesn't have anything that protects it from changing. So, okay, well, since there's land out there that we could grow onto, well, which land are we going to pick? Likewise, we have to think about intensification. Now, although the Ford government reduced the intensification that we need to get to at a minimum, we can go beyond it. So we were intensifying, we had to at 60% in the current urban area. We needed to, like, actually new growth, bring it into an area that's already got buildings on it. So we were going to 60% at least, but now it's down to 50%. So you will find one of the concepts, and it's concept 4, where we build that intensification to the minimum that the government has set. The other 3 concepts each assume more intensification in order to reduce the amount of land that we have to bring in to accommodate that population target that we've been assigned. So they each go up by 10% intensification. So we've got one that starts at 50, 60, 70, 80. And each time the land gets that would need to be brought in shrinks down to, in the case of concept 3, it shows all of the population being accommodated within the 2031 urban boundary. That's the community part, population and the commercial areas and the schools and so on, all within that boundary. But it does mean 80% intensification. So you got to wrap your head around what does that look like. But anyway, that's what that is. But in that concept 3, there is still 980 hectares of land brought into
Jane, 1 second. Can you hear me? Jane? Jane?
For expansion of employment uses.
Jane,
Yes.
can you hear me? Can I ask everybody to turn off their videos, because Jane's sound is warbly because our video screens are on.
Yeah.
And also, just to interrupt you for 1 sec, Nancy has a question. Is the unprotected land the white belt?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
A little better, but it's a little
Okay.
bit warbled, Jane, sometimes. And I think Carol and Helen and Andrea can turn off their video screen at the bottom there. Great. Thanks, Andrea.
Okay. And I'm closer to my phone now. Does that
Okay.
help?
Yeah, it's just more of, it's not, I don't think it's your sound, it's your bandwidth, I think.
Yeah, well, I'm up in an upstairs bedroom and it's still not good. I've got 1 bar.
Oh dear, okay. Do you have any other
Okay.
devices on? Maybe if you turn off other devices, that will help. Because this is living in the country, right?
Yeah,
Just so
exactly.
people know, there's also,
Um,
I'm making comments in the chat in case people miss anything. Okay, sorry, back to you, Jane. Sorry to interrupt. You were just getting warbled. It's okay, Helen, we're okay.
Okay. All right, so, okay, so yes, when they did the growth plan and the Greenbelt plan, they left some space that they didn't designate as anything. And everybody said, like, well, what is that? It's just all white. So all white means up for grabs in a way. It doesn't have restrictions on it. So, yeah, so concept 3, yeah, 980 hectares of employment land put in there. So when it comes to the employment land, it's all based on assumptions, and those assumptions can change. Will your share of office go up or not? But when you change from, I guess there's an underlying assumption of jobs per square meter of land, of buildings. Like, is this employment that
Oh, we're losing you.
occurs, will it jobs, a lot of jobs or a few
Oh, you're on mute there, Jane.
to speak? Yeah, it's a new thing, tap to speak. Okay, I think my ear knocked it off.
Okay.
Okay, so, it's what kind of jobs do you think you're going to get?
Mhm.
Because the way this growth thing works is by jobs, not by employment uses per se, or use. So the use of land gets tied to the jobs that are produced on the land. So we don't know what they are. We're guessing. And the bad part about guessing is that your guesses get worse as you go out in time. So now that we're supposed to plan to 2051, what the heck are we doing? We don't know. But I will say there is another report on the agenda from staff that talks about employment land that's still vacant and says we have enough to get us to 2041. Well, that's a big thing to tell us. Under normal planning conditions, we wouldn't open it up until Ford said add 10 more years. So that's why, things are there. They're based on planning assumptions. There's a lot of calculations that go into it, but they're all assumptions, and assumptions can be wrong. So you could question just about anything if you like. But we do know that we're going to grow. However, the jobs are tied to the population target, and we're not at all clear that the population target is not inflated. But if the population is inflated, so is the job target. So, it might be a good idea to wait 10 years before you open up and add more land for employment if you already have enough to 2041 based on today's jobs and population, including the population that we project to 2041. So I think I should probably go to questions at this stage.
Okay, let's put our screens back on and see if we can make this work again. Hey, everybody. Anybody have a thought or a question? If we go back to Louise's question, how about that one? So your concept 3 is the scenario 3, correct? And
Yes,
your 5th scenario does what?
it eliminates that 980 hectare increase. It becomes, so we could say the urban boundary for employment uses remains where it is today.
So what do we say to people who say, well, I don't want tall towers? What's your response to that?
Okay, well, there is already concept 3, which already constrains the urban boundary for population growth to not. So that is an existing scenario. What only thing in this motion is to also remove the expansion of employment lands. But what we have to realize is that we're dealing with concepts for discussion only. Nobody is deciding anything now, but soon we will be. And so all of the concepts somehow have to be planned to accommodate that target population that we've been assigned. And so even the concept 4 has 50% intensification included in it. However, I mean, I will just say we're going to have to do intensification. There's got to be some intensification to what is already existing to the year 2031. That's so some of it's not been built yet. So some of it, that 10 years between now and 2031 could be intensified before it gets built. You could change the plan. And actually we have seen that happening over time, where we get applications to build things that add intensity, even though, you know, they've been given the go ahead to build single family dwellings, let's say, or townhouses, and they decide, well, I want to build a 4-story building instead. So that would be an application for intensification. So, but there's no, will some towers be built? Well, they are now. So I think you can expect there will be applications for more towers to be built. So I can't say that won't happen. However, there's a lot of intensification, probably most of it that's not in towers. It's low rise, and even the builders call that the missing middle, the affordable housing that could be built that's not a tower. I don't think anybody could call a 3 or 4 story building a tower. That's what we would be pushing towards, to have more mixed use community, that, you know, the buildings are shorter than trees. They're not huge buildings. But even townhouses are considered intensification in a lot of areas. We've got an application right now in Georgetown to build some townhouses that currently there's 2 houses and they want to have 4 townhouses. Well, you've doubled the intensification there. But anyway, that's the future. There are going to be some towers, but that's not what this particular motion
Oh, we're losing you, Jane.
is about. It's all about employment land.
Interesting.
Any other questions?
Well, it looks like the tall towers are going to be by the, so, you know, like the Oakville GO station. Hasn't Ford said if you're within so many meters of a GO station, you know, they're going to tear down the Whole Foods Plaza near me, and the owner wants to build, I don't know, 11 stories, or I don't know if that's been approved or not. But I mean, it makes a lot of sense that if you're close to a big transit center, that you can build tall towers. It's environmental, isn't it?
You'd have to look at the official plan for your municipality to see what the zone is.
Okay.
I know in Georgetown, we rezoned 10 years ago around our GO station for some higher density.
Okay.
Jane, is the current plan that's in place from 21 to 2031 that was based on the Wynne government land use policies, is that not 80% density?
No, I don't think it is 80% density, but it is being built. No, I will say the last go round, they're achieving higher densities than things were planned for. But right now, between 2031 or 2021 and 31, nothing's been built yet.
Okay.
I think what Michelle, what you might be referring to is the 80% of new growth has to happen within the built up boundary. And only 20% could be greenfield. I think that's what it used to be.
No, we weren't there.
Wasn't it something like that?
No, it was less than
No.
that.
Okay. And then, but there's a difference, isn't there, Counselor, between the amount of people that have to be accommodated, like a percentage, and also the persons and jobs per hectare?
Yeah,
Okay, well, ask me that question again.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, that it used to be with the Wynne government, 60 persons and jobs per hectare was the density target, and that's now
Yeah.
been lowered to 50.
Yes.
And then there was also a certain percentage that they refer to as, and it's the difference between how many people need to be accommodated within or dwellings built maybe within the built up boundary and how much can invade green space, I guess, green fields.
Yeah.
Sorry, you're all choppy, but it's probably a question that's going too deep into the weeds anyway. It's okay.
Yeah, I didn't understand a word of your question. So what
That's okay.
do they
And
do?
it was
That's
a
okay.
guideline, but
Let's
we had
just
no-
suffice to
we kept
say
saying,
that
like,
it's the
how
density
could
is
this
lower.
happen? Like, okay,
oh, Carol, do you have a question?
that's been lowered.
Oh, you're on mute, Carol.
We can't hear you, Carol.
Sorry. Oh, amazing. Jane, for many gas, it's going to be the link with greenhouse gas emissions and climate and how you make that link and why sprawl is so bad. And it's not the route we want to go. It sets into place for the next 30 years, things that we won't be able to get back. And so can you just, I know you've done it in some of your letters, but can you go back and just go through some of the main points as to why it's so bad? Sprawl is so bad.
Well, I mean, it spreads everything out. So you create car culture. I mean, that's why it got started in the first place, was a love affair with the car. But you know, it spreads out at where our schools are. And now we've got to bus kids to school instead of walking to school. Everything is further away. So your groceries and your jobs, they're all further away, and people get in their car every time. But also houses emit more greenhouse gases than, say, townhouses or apartment units. So right away, you're driving up your emissions just from that. So it's when you have a compact urban form, and we've done the greenhouse gas emissions calculations for, say, in downtown Toronto versus Halton Hills, and it's far less per person in the city than it is out in the sticks here, because we can't support public transit either.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense. So we don't have the options. Now we've got to have, every house has got at least 2 cars, usually 3.
Yeah.
And we've got to park all those cars, and they're all driving all over the place. So yeah, it just doesn't, it's not good.
Thank you. I would think it means many more roads as well.
Well, yes, you know, and that goes to the greenhouse gas emissions that are just a result of building a road, or just the result of building sidewalks. Like cement alone has one of the highest greenhouse gas emissions associated with it. So all of your infrastructure, you know, all of our pipes are concrete. You know, everything takes more effort, which means more greenhouse gas emissions. Everything you build, you have to think about.
Thank you.
Jean, do you have a sense of how many delegations are happening on Wednesday?
I've had no communication from the clerk over the weekend about that. it'll be about between 12 and 15, but I don't know.
Is there, oh, Elaine has a question. Where is the conversation around district community energy? Has there been one in Halton?
That goes more to green development standards that each local municipality is working on. It's not to say it can't be written into the official plan for the region. It just has not been done yet. And so can become part of the conversation about how we write the plan, as opposed to where exactly do we grow. In Halton Hills, we are discussing with our developers of that 1,000 acres about either district energy or mandating heat pumps as a way to reduce energy requirements in the new builds.
And Jane, you have a greenhouse gas emission comparative analysis in your motion. Do you want to speak to that? And also what you're taking out of your motion? And why it wasn't amended on the screen at Halton Region? Why do you have to do that on Wednesday morning?
Okay, so the original motion had in about a permanent agricultural preserve or food belt, but we do not have it within our power to create such a thing. It's not within the purview of municipalities to do a permanent agricultural preserve. So there's no point in putting it in if you can't do it. But there is another aspect, and that is trying to get the farmers on side for this motion is proving to be a little difficult. And I'm having lots of back and forth with the farmers. And as of this morning, they're feeling more comfortable with potentially being delegation on the motion to support the motion as if it's amended, which it will be. So they don't want more regulation on them. They're fed up with the amount of regulation they already have to run their business and to be profitable as farmers. So that's why that amendment is there to take away something that we can't do anyway, and to increase the support for the motion. Did I miss anything?
Comparative greenhouse gas emissions.
Okay, so that's in that, we're not taking that out, but the reason
you wanna
for
talk-
that is we can eyeball the different scenarios and say which is better, but we don't know the quantum of how much it's better. People don't understand how big this thing is until we actually model it. And we want to model it so we can highlight that it's important to know what you're doing. If we don't model it, it's just oh yeah, well, 3 is better than 2 and 2 is better than 1, but how much? So the modeling is important, and staff were going to do it anyway, but they've said they're going to move it up because they understand the public needs to know too. Well, yeah, I guess they do.
But if your motion fails, so does the greenhouse gas emission comparative analysis, maybe?
Well, no, I think it'll still happen because staff did say they were going to do it anyway.
Okay.
I have a quick
I
question.
guess I should say now there's a next thing that happens after this before we run out of time is that at some point we got to come to a decision on not just 4 or 5 concepts, because nobody but there has to be a discussion at the end where we do mark on a map, what are we going to do? And that's partly why this discussion on Wednesday is good, because it gives us an opportunity to highlight that the process is even taking place.
Yeah.
So most people don't know. And yet we're very close to the point where we're going to have lines on a map, approve it, send it to the province, who will probably then send it back and say, sorry, you're not planning for the single family market housing. Do it over again. So anyway, it's,
Carol's got a question.
it's,
Uh,
yeah.
Jane, I think one of the things that we're discovering is that the general population does not have a good handle on intensification. And it's really hard to get people behind it when all they think about is the tall towers. And there is a real need for public education. And for me, I like this, hopefully will give us a chance for not only the regional councilors to have a debate and bring in specialists, but just for the general public. I think that once people understand it, it's linked to climate, it's linked to mitigation of climate disaster. I mean, I think that they would get it better and we would have more general support for intensification. It can be beautiful. It doesn't have to be all horrible, a 40-foot tower next to your house. I don't know where I go with that, but I think the public education is so key.
Yes, and I totally agree, Carol. And when we visit European cities, they don't all have tall towers, but they have great.
Well, it would be good if somebody
Sorry? You cut out, Jane.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I completely agree with the idea that we need public education. In fact, we need discussion. We need, you don't just lay that on people. You have to sort of have a workshop and presentations and show pictures and discuss, what are competing priorities. I mean, there's a lot to do here and no time to do it, which is why we had the delay motion to give us time to do that. But I guess, if we don't get anywhere with COVID and we're stuck, we're learning how to do webinars a lot better with panelists and presentations. And I certainly think we need to start showing people what intensified growth could be and what we don't want, what we do want and what we don't want when it comes to intensification.
Thank you, Jane. Nancy had a question. She's wondering, do you think it'd be helpful if GAS joined in with delegations? We have 2 or 3 so far. Do you think we need more?
Yeah, and I think on that last point, it's so important that we start talking about how much the community cares, but how much they don't know. And we need time.
Oh, you cut out again. We need time, sorry.
To educate. people, I guess.
And we need education, including.
We need education, Jane.
About intensification, I think she's talking about.
And Jane, do you think that?
Did I lose you?
Yeah, you did, but do you think this motion will pass?
Yeah, just what I need is, the thing that bothers me is that Marianne Mead Ward has not answered me. I've sent a direct question to her. Is she supporting it? And there's no answer. I don't know what that means. Now we've learned that there are councillors in Burlington who are planning on supporting it. And if they do, and we get all of Oakville and 1 at Milton and 2 at Halton Hills, then we've got enough to scrape by.
But if this motion fails, you can't bring it up next month, can you?
No,
Dead.
but no, we can't. But it doesn't mean that we can't still talk about firm urban boundaries for all uses, because these are all just concepts. We could come up with something completely different and improve it if we wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not the end of the world if it didn't pass. But I think it's important that it does pass, and that councillors understand that what people are looking for from them.
And
So-
Elaine asks the question, Jane, how can we help? Top reasons for voting on the motion, on the option. Is there any way to delay to better educate the public? Work? Well, we don't want to delay anymore, do we? This has already been delayed 1 month.
It's funny, we still don't have a letter back from the province about delay, but we know what they're going to say anyway. So we'll continue to get pushed. There's nothing wrong with asking at a council meeting for delay. There's nothing wrong with raising the issue of how difficult this is for the public to understand, and that we shouldn't take silence to mean that the public agrees.
So we don't need to be experts. A lot of Gaspers I've talked to said that this is such a complicated issue and they don't feel comfortable delegating. Would you say that that's actually a vote? It's almost like our delay motion was. Not understanding is more reason to have more options on the table that are studied carefully?
Yes, nobody expects the public to be an expert. You can speak from the heart. You can speak from how you're feeling about it. You could say you feel left out if you want, or you need more explanation. These are all reasonable things to say. I mean, even counselors don't seem to understand everything, so it's not bad. As I say, speaking from the heart, from what you know or what you want or what you're hoping for the future is all legitimate, and nobody will criticize you for that.
Excellent.
I just have a question on process. I wrote a letter in support of your motion to Dave Giddings, and I forgot to, I copied the clerk, but I didn't copy all the Halton Region councillors. I did so last night, and 2 of my emails bounced back saying, it's blocked. I don't know. So are you supposed to copy all the councillors or not?
Yeah, you don't need to, because the councillors, for the letters that they received that were received by the clerk by Friday, were circulated to councillors.
Okay. So I didn't need to do that last night.
But only if you CC the clerk, right, Jane? If you don't CC
Yeah.
the clerk, they wouldn't see it.
No, I CC'd the clerk, so I'm okay. That's why it
Yeah.
bounced back.
There you go.
Any other questions? We're just about 4 minutes over, and I did promise we'd end, but does anyone have a closing question?
Oh, that's excellent.
Well, Jane, there's Bev. Bev, go Bev. And maybe Mary. You'll just unmute yourself, Bev.
One of the concerns that I have is for low cost housing. And I'd like to, how much is that being taken into consideration? Because we have to change the way we live. And so that has to be made a part of everything, all our plans.
Yeah, at this stage, we are not into that detail. One thing, well, I mean, there's a lot of things that come into it, but that's more at the secondary plan stage. I mean, we can say that single family dwellings are not affordable.
Yeah.
And
that's
if anybody
true.
thinks that's going to do it, forget it. But
Yeah.
there will be plenty of opportunity to provide the lower cost or affordable housing and
Yes.
assisted housing as well.
Thank you.
Good. Well, I want to thank Jane for taking her time out. This is like the second time that in the last 2 weeks she's met with us, and we really, really appreciate it. We are so proud of your courage and working together with the mayor of Oakville, Mayor Burton. We are excited to partake in this with our letters and delegations, and lots of us will be tuning in and watching. And do they pay attention to how many people are on that live stream?
It's not obvious to the counselors
Okay,
because of the way it's set up. We only get the people that are signed in as panelists, so we don't know.
Okay, well, if anybody's interested in delegating, we do have until 4:30 tomorrow to let the clerk know. And it can be as simple as reading a paragraph from a piece of paper in front of you. It doesn't have to be complicated. And as Jane has pointed out, I think that they need to know that the public's watching. And if there's fewer delegates, they might assume that it's been swept under the rug and they're getting away with their connections to developers, because there's no good reason why we would expand onto farmland. As many of us have said, it's a no-brainer, but it doesn't seem to be with councillors for some reason all over, not just in Halton, but all over. So let's all consider that option of delegating or written delegations. If you haven't called your councillor, you could do that today. Pressure is pressure. We need it right now. And telling our neighbors as much as we can, and telling them that it's complex and why is this happening so quickly. So thank you, Jane, and thank you everyone